ready. We're prepared. Do not give in to fear. We are fearless. This is not the time to be afraid. This is a time to stand up and fight back and to resist any temptation for them to divide us. We're in this together. The rule of law is on our side. We will not give in, not give up. We will not capitulate. We will not bow. We will not bend. We will survive.
There was a burning of a plantation that we saw a whole lot of memes, some fun memes. Seeing Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman with teeth was fun. It was fun to watch. The AI is amazing. AI is amazing. Seeing them, people wanting to barbecue and all. I'm not agnostic. I do feel like the ancestors had the last word, or maybe somebody needed an insurance claim. I don't know what happened. There's a part of me, Dr. Carr does these tours and he calls them, death camp scenes, or like he's doing like a CSI, going to the crime scenes to go to these plantations, and he leaves a little of his DNA there when he comes, and he talks about going to these places. And I question when they start having these destination weddings on these plantations, and people sign up to have destination weddings on sites where our ancestors were brutalized, raped, murdered, and horrible things, worked to death. So I was happy with the burning. A friend of the show, his name is Michael Twitty. He's a chef and also a one of these pundits. He wrote a piece for MSNBC. Michael Twitty's been on. He probably will be on next week to talk about this too. But he wrote a piece at MSNBC. I'm gonna read a little bit of it. He said, "I'm in mourning," talking about the Nottoway plantation. He said, "I'm not in mourning in the same way that those embracing myths of the lost cause and the idea of, quote, moonlight and magnolias are, but I'm mourning the loss of another opportunity to teach about the history of enslavement. Our material history, including at places such as Nottoway, has messages for us. There are bricks where our ancestors' fingerprints remain, spiritual cachets, crystals, and sometimes lone cowrie shells reflecting traditional African beliefs. There are signs there of Islamic practices and practices of the early Black church. Even a rat's nest found in Charleston, South Carolina, had much to tell about the past. It wasn't just a rat's nest. It had been fashioned from the pages from a 19th century speller. In the darkness, hidden from the enslaver's prying eyes, we were learning to read." So he's writing about being like sad that this thing is burned to the ground. What are your thoughts?
This is one I have some thoughts about. So I think two things. Number one, the first thing I think is to go to a plantation as a site of vacation is a spiritual violation. It is a violation to vacation at a place where people were brutalized. And let me tell you how I thought about this. I thought about Golgotha Hill, where Jesus was crucified, right? Who would build a hotel there?
Oh, sir, I believe people would build a hotel there. I
think they might. And
I can imagine.
Yes, you're right. And therein becomes a problem. In other words, to try to commodify every spiritual moment and turn it into a cash endeavoring enterprise is part of the way in which we erase our consciousness. See, when you go to a plantation, first of all, to charge people to tour it, when the people who worked there worked for free, is already an ideological problem. But what I'm saying is, like you said, people have weddings, destination weddings at these places. In other words, people who are touring these plantations, Karen, are actually dreaming of what it might have meant to be the slave owner. And here's how you know. They are not going there to have their wedding in the shack where the Black people lived. It's never that. It's always the big house. Always. Because that big house represents something. It represents wealth. It represents power. It represents privilege, which is what people dream of in America. So when people are touring these plantations, they're touring these plantations as memory, as ancient memory in America. And what is it memory of? Memory when America's economy flowed uninterrupted. But it was on the backs of somebody else. And what I'm saying is, I have visited so many plantations, of course, in my work, and in my discipline. I've gone to so many plantations all over the South. And every time I go, number one, I never walk around with the tour group, because the tour guides always piss me off. The tour guides are always talking about this wasn't a place. There's never ever the tour guide who says these slave captors were so brutal to black people. They were so horrible. It's never that. It's always, yes, slave masters were horrible, but not the ones who lived here. It's always, I've never seen the exception yet.
Walk me through the last plantation you visited.
Dr. I went to the Reynolds, I think it was the Reynolds Plantation in South Carolina, right? And I was so unbelievably frustrated when I got, because they took you in this big house, right? And they were saying, oh, this guy, he didn't beat slaves. He did not. Yes, he had them. Yes, we're going to say he had, but he didn't beat slaves. And I said, he didn't punish the slaves here. No. I said, oh, wow, this is really interesting. And they had this big dining room, right? And they said, well, these houses didn't have a kitchen. I said, there was a kitchen. It wasn't in the house then. It was behind the house. Because they didn't want the heat, right, from the kitchen, right, to make the house so unbearable in the summer. But somebody was cooking out there and walking the food in here, right? And so people were like, oh, wow, oh, my gosh, wow, how did you know that? They'd say, literally, how did you know? I said, how did I know that? Are y'all kidding me? And so what I'm saying here is it's never an homage to black ancestors when you go to these plantations. At greatest, it's a mention. But there is an homage. The homage is to those who owned it. And people come by the thousands to these plantations. Nobody ever announces it. Nobody ever says it. But my argument is people come by the thousands because the dream of America starts on those plantations.
Well, can we sit with that? Can we sit with that for a second? Because, those of us whose ancestors worked those plantations,
yes,
we have quite a different feeling about it. That's right. Complete, and it's frustrating because you're fighting with people that thousands of them are showing up. Many of them don't even have ties to people who enslaved.
Right.
The number, I think it was like 30% of land, 30% of white people, what they call white people,
that's right,
actually owned people. So the majority of people did not own people, but you're saying the 70% aspired to.
Absolutely.
And so that was
of it. They wanted it. Okay. They prayed for it. Absolutely.
Okay. So 100 and something years later, they go to these places with wishing they were in the land of cotton, with the whimsical Dixie in their hearts. Yes. So what does that look like today for them? Because as they walk around, like there's very few places now, and I see the hands rolling back, and y'all see it too, right? If we're talking about 6-figure jobs and that's us, Black women and men with degrees, because they told us that was the pathway, and others, Asians or whatever. We're getting degrees. Now we're getting these jobs. We're starting businesses. If you go on transit, we're there. If you go longshore, we're there. Truck drivers, we're there. We're everywhere in places making money. And I just read a stat or did a piece yesterday from CNBC that men across the board are not working. Right. So when Trump says we're bringing back these coal miner jobs, like who wants black lungs? Yeah. But the hope of actually having a status again, because what we're dealing with are people who don't have status, but they set the table for what status is. And we went and got it. We went and did all of the things. And now you didn't do it. And now you still want status, even though you didn't do any of the things. So you're going to go to these places in hope of, and now you finally have your king to roll back those times when you and I have to jump off of curbs and yes them and all that, which we're not doing, by the way. It ain't happening. It's really not happening. But this is how it starts, because I was thinking about it, right? When people say, I'm not my ancestors, your ancestors weren't your ancestors until they were, right? So those first Black folk were like not having it. And you know what happened to them?
Yeah.
Okay, so we them people now. Okay, so what you gonna do right now? So I'm seeing this and I'm feeling. I'm like, folk ain't ready for how this is, because they've been planning for this for so long.
For so long. But the truth of the matter is, the plantation is the blueprint. And the reason the plantation is the blueprint is because, as you said, they told us, go get an education, go get right, in order to lead you to success. But they did not tell us that this was really only going to lead you to a job. Right? Somebody's going to get that in 1 minute. Because on the plantation, the secret to success is that the slave master doesn't have a job. He doesn't have a job. We have jobs. He does not have a job. The dream of America is to be wealthy without a job. That's why people love Elon Musk. That's what somebody's going to get this one day. Karen, listen to me. Every time people mention Elon Musk, you know what they say? The richest man in the world. Every time they say his name, they name also his status. Why? Because people are numbed by the hope of mimicking that existence. And the plantation physically represents that. People can walk by them slave shacks and never be troubled whatsoever. And look at that, go inside that big house and marvel and gawk in awe. Absolutely. Because the dream is to be served. The dream is to have servants. It's not to have a job.
Right. So they built a facsimile of that in corporate America, which is why they want you back in the office, because you got to be back in the field so that somebody could oversee you, right? Not that whatever your job is, you do it better at home. They know it. The stats tell you, but they want you there because this requires oversight, overseeing.
Absolutely. And at home, you could be doing your job fine, but you could also be taking notes on how you going to open your own business.
That's right.
No.
You could be doing your own business. Why are you doing their business? Because you're that good at your job. You already know.
Oh, hell no. Absolutely not. Because again, the plantation as blueprint. See, the problem with, a good slave was not just one who worked hard. No. A good slave was the one who reported to the master anything happening on the plantation that seemingly might disturb the master-slave contract. That's why the master needed an overseer, right? Overseer, you're supposed to make sure that nothing happens around this place. We have overseers now on practically every job in America. We just changed the name.
Yes. These middle management people who do nothing but report back and have meetings.
To the master.
Okay, so let me ask you this. It's Thrive Thursday. This is an esoteric, this is a larger question. In this, because I've been thinking a lot about this, right? And when I ask the question, you live somewhere, what do you need? It's a much larger question. Because in the question is the answer, right? Like if we're to survive and thrive, right? So we've been taught, you go to school, you get a job, you get a house, you get a car, you marry, you get 2.5 children, they go to school, you work to make sure they go to school, and the cycle continues, right? So you're on this treadmill that you can't seemingly get off. Some of you are like, I'm going to start my grandmama's business. I'm going to do this, but you do it while you're doing that, and then you wake up and you're, too old and tired to do anything in terms of living, right? And we all dream of like, if I could just retire. So then they give you that dangling, right? At 65, you can go and move to Florida and do nothing because you've served, and we're going to give you a check every month. And I always knew inherently, Dr. Black, that this was a setup, right? So then the question always becomes, what do I really need?
Right.
And then have you really had that discussion with yourself? So for me and you, our desires, what we need to feed, we need to engage with folk, we need to teach. Like, this drives us, it makes us happy, gives us joy. Now, can I get money? Can I make money? Can I feed myself doing this? So you've gone into academia. I was in academia until I was like, oh, you want me to come back into the workplace? No, I'm not doing it until I was like, I'm not doing that.
Absolutely.
But I had the luxury to be able to say no. But for a lot of people, they don't. So they do things and they're miserable. But you want to be happy. So we all have these gifts and talents that we need to. So how did they do it before they snatched us off of? How did people live before they put us in these ships and brought us over here to start this corporate plantation thing?
We're ready. We're prepared. Do not give in to fear. We are fearless. This is not the time to be afraid. This is a time to stand up and fight back and to resist any temptation for them to divide us. We're in this together. The rule of law is on our side. We will not give in, not give up. We will not capitulate. We will not bow. We will not bend. We